Okay, so first was just kind of describing, giving you an introduction on how to this, the meaning of it, right? So now I'm going to get into the seder. So if you look over here, you know, that is in this case lamb, all right? It's lamb patties, not beef patties. People are hung up over what it is to sacrifice and not sacrifice. Some people use eggs in their seder. Some people use the shank of a bone of a lamb. And, you know, there's arguments. I'll make an argument from my position real quick. An egg and using shank bone is stuff that the pagans used to make witchcraft. And because they believed that the egg was, you know, the symbol of fertility and all that other stuff. Whatever. It's an argument as good as any other argument. And later on we can talk about the details of why it should be lamb, but it is part of the process of commemorance. Okay? And so that's why I choose lamb, and I recommend that you get some lamb and that you eat lamb. Replace the egg, replace the bone with real lamb. If you can't find lamb, goat is also acceptable, because these were type of the animals that we used during the time that they were in the desert and into the promised land. Okay, so the next one is the bread of affliction. And the reason why it's called the bread of affliction is best told by a very interesting story, that when people were liberated, that the first thing that they had to do as slaves or as captive people from the Holocaust was to learn how to eat bread together, instead of what they were taught was, get what's for you because you don't know what you're going to have tomorrow, because it's all about me. And so the bread of affliction, the moment that you release your slave brain, is the moment that you learn how to share bread. In this case, I have picked a special kind of cracker, if you will, a matzah, and I want you to see that it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sides, kind of like the star, the core of the Star of David, right? So what I like about it is, and I put it in stacks of 6 to remember what happened in the tabernacle, how they were stacked, the bread of holiness, right? And
so, ladies and gentlemen, good evening.
And so,
you guys may be tuned in from around the world.
You just give me one moment. Oh, I'm sorry about that. So the bread is not only for the bread of affliction, but the reason why it was matzah is because you know, we had to eat it in a hurry, and so therefore it didn't have time to raise, and because there is a raising effect if you take bread and you let it sit for longer than 20 minutes. So meaning that there is sin in the air, and it's really easy to get infected with it if you don't maintain your mind in meditation. That's what it means. It's not that we're sinful, that we're dirty and we're ugly. That's a slave mentality. We were not dirty and ugly. We were made in the perfect way, in the image of the Most High. And so this is all about setting ourselves free from the mind of a slave. So that's the bread. So we eat in a hurry for 2 reasons, right? To remind us of the bread, and then, you know, later on I'll show you that one of the practices that I do is at my first piece of meal, I eat it the way I'm dressed, like I was gonna go to work. And then immediately after that, I go and I change clothes and I get well dressed, and then the seder, the second part of the seder begins, because we are supposed to practice eternity. And so that's one of my practices that I do. Part of this is also to return to a time in which you must feel like you are a slave coming out of Egypt. So that's part of the mitzvah. That's part of what we're supposed to do. And that you are going into a place because we were called to be the kingdom of priests. It is our job by doing the mitzvahs that when we do it right, then we elevate the world to a higher level, and therefore we're drawing heaven closer to us. So that was the bread. The now these particular cups represent the 10 plagues, and so we don't drink from this. We dip our fingers and we dab it on something in order to represent all the plagues. All right, that's a mixture of wine and crushed grapes mixed together, and that's why it looks that way. The bitter herbs is to remind us of the bitterness of slavery. And then the other thing that I forgot to set up is the salt water. The salt water is to remind us of the tears. Okay, I can't remember. The horseradish is to remind you of the impact and the bitterness of what happens when there's sin in our life, when there's an offense, right? It might be an offense to the Most High, it's an offense in between us, and how much that really freaking sucks. So that is a shock and a reality of the way you cannot get away from having a good relationship, and you're gonna have that nasty part of your life. That's life, and that's what is there to remind us of that. You know, there's a reality that there was a time that we worshipped other gods. There was a time when we were idolatrous. That's to remind you of those moments. And so now we get to this piece, which is supposed to look like dirt, or maybe, I don't know else, something else, but it should be grainy. It should be like a brown color to it, and it should have some bitterness. Some sweet to it. So what I put in there is crushed nuts, honey date, or date honey, however you say that, and then a little bit of coconut cream, and some other cinnamon and some other things to make it be pasty to your taste, right? Because it's supposed to represent the mortar that bring the stones together and keep the stones together. The sweat of the mitzvahs, the hard labor, is that a lot of times people look at us and they say, oh, you guys do all that stuff because you're trying to gain salvation. That's far from it. There's a sweetness in doing things in order. There is a beauty in doing things the way the Father commands, not the way we want it. So that represents that thing that keeps the stones together. We are the temple that fitly framed together lively stones. Well, what's in between the stones? The mortar of slavery. So now, that's it for all these, these pieces that are here. Now we recount the 10 plagues, as I said, and we dip our finger and we call each one by name, and we try to associate that to something in our lives. 10 is also the number of judgment. With judgment, always there's mercy. There are 4 cups that we drink, meaning there's 4 times that we fill up this cup and we drink. One is said that it's because we are now wealthy and rich and abundant, and we have to no longer worry about mincing a little bit of wine. So it's a great opportunity to get completely blasted drunk. Just kidding. It's there are 4 cups, and I'm going to tell you what they are. One is kiddush, which is the regular one where we say, blessed are you, God, King of the universe, that gave us a wine. Then there's the magid, and then there's the bit hamason, and there's halal. So these are the recounting. This is the blessing, and then the other one is the joy. I add a 5th cup, and I say it's the cup of Messiah. because Torah talks a lot about the number 5, and I say that the 5th cup is going to be that cup that we drink in joy, right? That we drink without any kind of no other reason. It's the cup of abundance. So we can drink for joy because we have accomplished something. And the 5th cup represents the stuff that we haven't done, the secret stuff that the Father is doing behind us, the rescuing of us. And that's why it represents Messiah. It represents the prophet Elijah, the spirit of the prophet Elijah coming. And now, there are 4 questions asked, representing 4 children. And so why the number 4? Because we were by God's judgment sent out to the 4 corners of the world. And the reason 4 is because we're coming back together. And not only that, but also because it represents 4 types of people. All right? So I'm going to give you a brief on it, and why, the question is asked, why do we do it this time, once a year? Because we're commemorating and everything that we covered before, because we are remembering that we were once slaves. Don't get so haughty about who you are. And just because you have good things doesn't mean that you can't remember where you came from. So the next question is, why this night? What is so special about this night? Because we went from educating, right, because we were once slave, to now to remember, because we're commanded to remember. And the third question is, why do we dip our stuff twice and we never do it any other time? It's because it's this issue of tikkun. We are taking all the judgments that were put against us, or the rules, and we're turning it into 2 things: gratitude and mindset. We were slaves, always, serving masters and idol worshipers, worshiping other gods. But now we have the gratitude of being free people, regardless of what anybody else thinks. And we have the right mindset, the mindset for abundance, for victory, and for freedom. And the last question is, I write it as this: why so long? The question is, why do we sit around the table? Why do we recline? We recline because we are practicing eternity, because we dress up and we are pretending, or reenacting is a better word, for what the freedom is. We are practicing eternity, and so we want to extend it as long as possible. And that is why the 4 questions. 4 different kinds of people that don't understand it. And if you really think about it, each question is bringing you into a deeper relationship with the Most High. So the questions are graduated. There's one more thing that I'm not practicing it here, observing it, which is taking the afikomen and putting it in a couple different layers, and then you break one in half and you hide it. Look, that's a very good thing that the ancient wise people of Israel did, and it has a lot of cool symbolism. Nothing wrong with it, and it's very good. Some people have interpreted to be, death and resurrection of Messiah, whatever. I'm doing this the way I explain it, for the reasons that I explain it. I hope that helps, and I'm sure we'll have lots of discussion over it, and Chag Sameach.